What is going on, guys? I am Paul Ryan, your host of the ATB Fantasy Show. If you're new to the show, thank you for joining us. And to our regular listeners, welcome back. With me tonight is co host Mr. Pigskin Papers himself, Dave Hartman. Dave, how are you?
I'm good, Paul. I'm really enjoying coming on every week and co-hosting with you and talking about the regular season and now the playoffs. And it was a good weekend, I think. A lot better than wild card weekend last year, where most of the games were blowouts. This weekend kind of had a little bit of everything, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So what we're going to do is we'll spend part of the show recapping what went on last week, and then we'll shift towards looking ahead to next week. And I just want to point out that my team, the Miami Dolphins, came up a little short. We'll be talking about that. Well, I'm not wearing a Dolphins hat, but Paul is representing the star of the Dallas Cowboys, who put one on Tom Brady and the Bucks, and we'll talk about that also. Paul's got a big smile. His team was awesome this week.
Well, Dave, I want to say I appreciate you coming on and being the new co-host here for the last couple of weeks. Man, I always enjoy talking ball with you. In regards to your Dolphins, I know they lost, but how are you feeling about the Giants? I know we're going to talk about it, but does that kind of
Yeah, it
ease the
kind of makes
pain?
up for it because they're kind of my like 1B team. I didn't grow up a Giant fan, but my wife did, and her family has had season tickets going way back. So I go to a lot of Giant games, and I've my kids are all Giants fans. I got a lot of friends who are Giants fans, so I really pull for them, and have really enjoyed what they're doing this year. And I'm looking forward to talking about their game as well, because that was a big win for them. Obviously, they had the worst record in the NFL over the last 5 years, actually tied with the Jets, which is sort of pathetic since I'm here in the New York area and people have not had a lot to talk about in terms of NFL football. And we don't really have college football locally that's any good. So it's been sort of dead around here for 5 years in terms of getting excited about football. And so, the Jets were competitive for most of the season, and then the Giants doing what they have done this year, and they're not finished, um, is a great story. And so I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. As a Giants fan, this might be weird to say for some, but I'm really happy for Daniel Jones. I feel like people kind of, they hated the pick. A lot of Giants fans didn't like the pick initially. People questioning if he's a franchise quarterback, happy that he didn't get his 5th-year extension, but for him to be having the year that he's having and then to win a playoff game, I'm happy for him.
Yeah, same. The team took a lot of heat when they drafted him. And look, the jury's still out in terms of whether it was smart to take him as high as they did. Could they have waited, gotten him a little later? We'll never know. And we'll have to see if he can sustain what he's done this year. But obviously, with Brian Daboll there and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, they've really done a great job, and they've had a lot of injuries to their wide receivers. They're on basically a street free agent and their third string receiver when the season started. And so they've made. I mean, they have Saquon Barkley, and he's a phenomenal running back, but they've made the most with not that much to work with. So I'm happy for Jones also, and he's going to get paid. I mean, I don't think there's any question. I don't know what they'll do. Maybe they'll tag Barkley. I don't know if they have enough money for both of them, but I'm pretty sure the Giants will do what they can to keep Daniel Jones.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be an interesting offseason for the Giants and Daniel Jones.
Yep.
Dave, before we get into our discussion tonight, where can people find you on Twitter?
Yep. So on Twitter, I'm at Pigskin Papers. Both of the P's are capitalized, and I post all my content there. But I also have a blog, which you can get to at thepigskinpapers.com. And the article that's up right now is a preview of the division round, where I give a breakdown of each game, main storylines, and my picks and predictions. Last week, I was 5-1 straight up. I know you were too, Paul, because we picked the 6 games identically.
Yeah.
And I'm 4-2 against the spread, which I think is a little more meaningful because it's not that hard to, kind of pick the winners in the wild card round. But anyway, my column is up, and I hope you'll all check it out. Paul, where can people find you on Twitter, and where can they find your content?
Yes, sir, guys. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. And my content is on Twitter, my article, Trust or Bust. That is usually, it's just an in season. This year, I decided to try to give a chance at playoffs just to kind of keep in the habit of writing, something I've never do, but I'd like to become a better writer. So as many reps as I can get at, I want to do that. So I did a wild card article last week that didn't get published, unfortunately, because the editor had some things going on, so he couldn't get to it. He wasn't actually expecting anything from me. I plan on doing a divisional round as well. I know the week's getting kind of late, but I could probably crank that out, and that should be up and ready on Saturday. And of course, guys, if you're not familiar with my other podcast, the Across the Cowboys podcast, with my friend and fellow writer CD Piglet, a writer for the Cowboys Wire, very smart football guy. We record every Monday and typically on Fridays as well to do a preview of the game. So be on the lookout for that. Again, you can find those on Twitter and on YouTube.
Excellent.
So Dave, let's get after it, sir. Looking at the wild card weekend, what was your favorite game?
So there were a few games that I really enjoyed watching, but I'm going to go with the Chargers-Jaguars game for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, it was the best finish. It was sort of the one game that was decided on the very last play. Close to it. And it was also, there were three comebacks that in the games that they were all in the AFC. All three of the AFC games had kind of the favorite ahead and then the underdog, if you will, and the Jaguars were a short underdog. The Ravens and Dolphins were bigger underdogs, and the Jaguars are the one that came through. The other two came up just short. So it was kind of the one game. It was also like a little bit of a train wreck for the Chargers, so it was kind of hard to turn away. You could kind of feel what was happening, even when the Jaguars got that touchdown before the end of the first half. I don't think it's a game if they don't get that touchdown, but to cut it to 20, and that's a lot, 20, but you got a whole half of football. And then in the second half, you could just kind of feel it. The Chargers couldn't get it going on offense. They kind of abandoned the run because they weren't really having success with it. And they kept punting. It wasn't like the Jaguars were getting turnovers. They were just getting stops and then going down the field and scoring. Pedersen made that decision to go for two when it was they scored the touchdown to I think it was make it 30-26, right? So if you kick the extra point there, you're within a field goal, and that would be kind of the conservative thing to do. Get it so that if you get the ball back, you don't need a touchdown. But if you get the two and then you get it back and kick a field goal, you could win the game that way. And that's exactly what happened. And they benefited from a penalty that put the 2-point conversion on the one. And then I don't know if Lamar Huntley saw what Trevor Lawrence did, but Trevor, just kind of reached out and put the ball over the goal line. And we'll talk about that later. But for me, that was the best game, or the one I enjoyed watching the most. It was also kind of hard to watch from the standpoint of the Chargers, because the Chargers have lost a lot of games in the last few years where you're kind of like, how did they lose that game? And this was the most Charger loss of all the Charger losses. And I wondered if Brandon Staley would survive it. I mean, they fired their offensive coordinator. They're apparently going to keep Staley, and I understand that. But, and just while we're here talking about the AFC, kind of interesting. The last 2 years now, no wild cards have won in the AFC on wild card weekend. The division, all three division winners have won their games. But it sure looked like the Chargers were going to be the one wild card that maybe got a win. And Miami and Baltimore had a shot also. Over in the NFC, you've had one wild card get out of the wild card round each of the last 2 years. So kind of interesting there. For you, Paul, And I'm looking at your hat, but I don't know what your answer is going to be. What was your favorite game of Wild Card Weekend?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Cowboys fan, as good as the games were this weekend, it has to be the Cowboys. I mean, 30 years in the making, not winning a road playoff game. Dak Prescott winning that big game that everybody's been asking him to do. The critics saying he can't do. Beating Tom Brady for the first time in franchise history. I mean, Dak finally beating Tom Brady. What an amazing game. It was just and especially the way that we won. I was not expecting that, but it was I'm not sure of a word I can use. I mean, I was really shocked, honestly, the way that we handled the Buccaneers. But that was my favorite game,
Let me
Cowboys
let me
Tampa.
let me ask a follow-up question about that game, because I've spent, as a Dolphin fan, I've spent the last almost, 20 plus years rooting against the Patriots, and just, you never count them out. You never count Brady out. And the Bucks MO this year, and it happened again in that game, and I wrote about this last week that I thought it was going to happen, is they're terrible in the first half. They kind of never
Yeah,
get the offense going. They had a lot of games this year. Like the majority of their games, they had single digit points in the first half, and the Cowboys shut them out in the first half. At what point did you exhale and say, okay, we have enough points. They don't have enough time. There's no way Tampa's coming back. There's no Brady magic that's going to happen in this game. When did you feel comfortable as a Cowboy fan that the game was in the bag?
honestly, I talked about this on my Cowboys podcast, but just because of the Cowboys' history, knowing who Tom Brady is, I mean, even when it was like 31-17, and Tampa Bay recovered that onside kick, I was still in the back of my mind. I was like, man, Tom Brady's going to do something crazy here. Dallas is going to find a way to blow this thing. But, I was feeling really confident when it was 24-0, even after Maher had missed his fourth extra point. But then when we went up to I believe it was 31-0, I was like, okay, this thing is over.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is after Ron Curse went out of the game, it seemed like the Cowboys, and I know they've had a lot of injuries in their secondary. It seemed like after Curse went out, the Bucks finally started having a little bit more success and were able to put together a couple of drives. And that might have just been because the game was out of reach and the Cowboys, just lost a little bit of focus because there wasn't enough time for a comeback. But um, are you worried about their secondary this week?
Oh, I mean, you can't not be when you think about how Shanahan can scheme his receivers open, and then you think about our secondary outside of Trayvon Diggs. It's a lot of unproven players who are playing only in their second playoff game outside of a Ron Curse or um, a couple of other guys. I mean, I'm not even sure how many playoff games Malik Hooker played when he was with the Colts.
Right.
Um, Donovan Wilson, he's been a Cowboy his entire career. This is going to be, I believe, his third playoff game. So I'm nervous because Shanahan. I mean, we saw what Kellen Moore was able to do against that Buccaneers defense. Yeah, I mean, think about what Shanahan can do.
Yeah. All right. I'm getting us ahead of ourselves talking about next week, but I was just curious.
Yes, sir.
As we're sort of wrapping up that Dallas Tampa game. So let me ask you, Paul, what player do you think had the best performance of the wild card weekend? Who stood out for you?
Man, I got to stick with my guy, Dak Prescott. Only 8 incompletions, a QBR of 143.3. I'm not sure how close to perfect that is, but it's got to be very extremely close. 5 total touchdowns, no turnovers for the first time, and I'm not sure how many weeks. I mean, Dak was special on Monday night.
Yeah. He also just looked, and the announcers were saying it, like he was seeing the whole field. He just looked in control. He knew when he needed to run, which he really
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been doing as much this season. But there were a couple times where he kind of just tucked it and ran when that's all there was, and made positive plays. So I think that's, certainly from a statistical standpoint, it's hard to argue against him. My answer for this one is Daniel Jones.
Oh,
And
that's a good one, man.
I know they were playing an inferior defense. I think the Vikings were the 31st ranked defense in the NFL, but they were also on the road, playing a team that only lost 4 games. And Jones was, kind of everything. It was almost like a perfect game from the offensive coordinator down to Jones to the rest of the players executing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's now the only quarterback in postseason history to have 300 plus yards, 2 plus touchdowns, and 70 plus rushing yards in a game. He kind of was doing whatever he wanted, hitting receivers in stride, making big plays with his legs, threw 2 touchdowns, clean game, no turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants' first 4 possessions, outside of when they got the ball at the very end of the first half and just took a knee, basically, were 3 touchdowns and a field goal. So the Vikings couldn't stop them. The Giants didn't punt until kind of late in the third quarter, maybe, or midway through the third quarter. And I thought Jones was really impressive, and I thought that the Vikings had no answer for him. It was drive after drive. They were mixing in the run well, but Jones was really had the keys to the car, and we talked about him earlier. He really showed me a lot. Now this week, we'll get into it later, but is a much, he goes from the playing the 31st ranked defense to the second ranked defense.
Right.
And a hostile crowd, a team that's had a week to prepare, an extra week. So we'll see. But he's my answer for this week for the player that impressed me the most. It might not have been the best performance, but he was the player that impressed me the most this week.
Hey, you won't get any argument from me. I really enjoyed watching that game. I thought it was a good matchup, honestly, and it was close, And unfortunately for Kirk Cousins, I mean, I don't know what that last play call was, but I thought that was a good game.
Yeah, I think what Kirk said was he had nothing downfield, nobody was open, he didn't want to just throw a pick, and it came down to whether T.J. Hawkinson could break a tackle and make a play, and he'd been doing it. He had a couple receptions during the game where he did break a tackle. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, I think Kirk can say that all he wants, and his coach kind of threw him under the bus a little bit. I think on a 4th and 8, the throw has to go past the sticks unless a guy is wide open and has room, yards in front of him, which is unlikely with the kind of coverage you're going to get on a play like that. I think the throw has to go past the sticks, but it's the way it goes.
All right, Dave, we're going to stick with the wild card weekend, and you look at that Seattle 49ers game. Was there a point that you thought maybe Seattle was going to win this thing?
I know they had a 1-point lead at the half, which they basically had because of a stupid penalty on the 49ers. I mean, that game was basically, close to tied at the half. But I was never in doubt on that one. The 49ers are the better team. Seattle's defense, is young and pretty inexperienced. And I thought it was just a matter of time. I didn't think the 49ers would put it on them after the half like they did. And
Right.
really the game, the 49ers scored, and then the Seattle was coming down. They were in San Francisco territory and they turned it over. And that was kind of the game. And then once the 49ers went up 2 scores, that was that. I mean, I guess the one nagging thought in the back of my mind is, what if all of a sudden Brock Purdy, kind of turns into a pumpkin, as people keep saying. I'm kind of tired of that expression, but what if he suddenly starts making mistakes and turning the ball over? Then Seattle could have had a chance, but I just didn't see that happening. I was always pretty confident that the 49ers were in control, even when they were down 1 point at the half. What about you? What were you thinking?
Yeah, when they went into halftime up 1 point, I really wanted Seattle to come away winning this thing, but in my heart of hearts, I knew that I knew that Seattle, I mean, not Seattle, but I knew that the 49ers were the better team, and I'm not sure I ever truly thought that Seattle was going to win that game.
So along the same lines, that the Chargers went up 27-0. Trevor Lawrence threw an interception on his very first playoff pass of his career. Threw another one on the next drive, but had thrown 4 before Jacksonville scored a point. Plus, they muffed a punt. Did you turn that game off at any point? I mean, I know a lot of people did. So I'm wondering what you were thinking when it was 27-0.
Dave, I hope I'm not alone here, but I think bad football is better than no football. I mean, the off season without the NFL is so long. I feel like there's nothing to do. It's really a depressing time for me because I really truly love football. But no, I never turn it off. The whole time I was rooting for Jacksonville. I mean, feel like I've been talking about Jacksonville for a few weeks now, thinking they were going to sneak into the playoffs. And then, of course, you and I both picked them to beat the Chargers. Even when they were down 27-0, I was just like, I don't know. I'm not buying that the Chargers are going to win this thing, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I'll be honest, and I did not turn the game off. I kept watching it. It's funny because we're podcasting every week, and I write about the NFL. I sort of feel like I need to watch all these games, but I want to anyway.
Yeah.
But at one point this past weekend, my wife, who loves football, is like, are you going to ever turn this off? I'm like, I gave her the work excuse. I'm like, I'm working. Watch these games. But no, I did not turn that game off. And like I said earlier, once the Jaguars got that one touchdown before the half, and you see this sometimes, that kind of like calmed them down, I think. And they got a great coach, and who knows what he said to them at the half. But, in the second half, Trevor Lawrence was calm. He wasn't like forcing stuff. These guys, they figured out what kind of coverages the Chargers were throwing at them. I think they were surprised at the way they were sitting on the short routes, and the Jaguars figured it out, and they have good pass catchers. They have good weapons, and the Chargers kind of stopped executing on offense. That's really the Chargers could have just had a couple of drives. That I don't think the Jaguars could have come back the way they did, but yeah, I didn't turn that game off.
The way that Jacksonville was able to take the Chargers secondary out of the game in the second half, that was beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. It was a great job by their brain trust, coaches and quarterback, of adjusting to something at the half and coming out with a slightly different game plan and executing it.
Yes,
and then these are important reps for Trevor Lawrence. That was his first playoff game.
Agreed. Dave, you still with me?
Yep, I'm still with you. I think we're going to.
Sorry, my screen was freezing up, so I apologize.
Oh,
I've been having an issue with StreamYard.
I'm good.
So another quarterback that was getting some meaningful reps possibly this weekend was Skylar Thompson. When you look at his performance and you look at that Bills game, were you more impressed or surprised by Skylar Thompson's performance or by Miami's defense?
I think I'll go, given just those two choices, I'll say Miami's defense. I think I was most impressed by the fact that Miami showed up to play and that Mike McDaniel had his team. Everyone was saying all week, including me, that Miami was going to get killed in this game. They were on their third string quarterback, no Raheem Mostert. There were a lot of reasons to just sort of think, okay, Miami was glad they got to the playoffs. And now they're, and in my mind was what the Bills did to the Patriots a year ago in the wild card round, where they destroyed them as much as Team A can destroy Team B in an NFL game. So I was really impressed with the fact that the Dolphins showed up and stayed in the game. I mean, Thompson was what he was. He made some plays, he made some throws. He actually, the Dolphins had a couple of costly drops, which weren't his fault, obviously. He butchered the clock, and that really hurt the team because they took 2 timeouts rather than take delay of game penalties. And then they had the critical 4th and 1 on their last drive, and they don't have any timeouts left, and they take a delay of game, and now it's a 4th and 6, and that's obviously much harder. I mean, the defense, gave up a lot of points, but they got a touchdown and two other turnovers. I don't think Josh Allen played well. I mean, I think he kind of played hero ball. He was throwing a lot of balls way downfield rather than just run their regular offense where
Hmm.
they take occasional deep shots, but they kind of kill you with a mix of run and pass and Allen running. I think they have a lot of stuff they need to clean up. But I was impressed. Like I said, I was just impressed that Miami showed up and made a game of it and didn't count themselves out. Their defense played hard. You know, Bradley Chubb made a big play, which we haven't really seen that much of since they traded for him. So I was impressed. I mean, I don't think Skylar Thompson is ever anything more than a backup, but it's good for him that in his rookie year, late round pick, you know, he's gotten an opportunity to play. Um,
Hmm.
so you know, I think he acquitted himself pretty well, but I don't think he played a particularly good game. What about you? What stood out?
Well, yeah, no, I'd like to say you were talking about Mike McDaniel. Hopefully, after that performance, the people who were thinking maybe he should be fired or be let go, hopefully he put that discussion to rest because, like you said, having your team ready to play like that with your third string quarterback and everybody counting you out and only to only lose by 3 points and to get that performance out of your defense. I mean, I think that was a confidence booster, hopefully to Dolphins fans in the front office.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins can go into the offseason feeling good about how their season ended. It was such a weird season for them with, you know, Tua getting concussed 3 times and a 3 game winning streak, a 3 game losing streak, a 5 game winning streak, then a 5 game losing streak. It was a very strange season, but you know, they made the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, and they seem to be going in the right direction. It's a tough division, but we'll see. So we talked a little bit about Kirk Cousins before in that last pass he threw, and uh, thinking about that game for a little bit and just kind of about where the Vikings are. Do you think they can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins?
I want to say you mentioned that we talked about his performance, and I don't think that Kirk Cousins is the reason that the Vikings lost that game. I mean, he had over 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. But as far as winning a Super Bowl, I mean, Kirk has shown that he struggles in primetime games, and he has a 1-4 playoff record. So signs would point to no. However, we've seen quarterbacks with half of Kirk's skill win a Super Bowl or go to a Super Bowl. So if everything is almost perfect around Kirk, I think he could win a Super Bowl. I really do. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, well, I agree that, you know, I mean, I think right now, if you put him on Dallas or San Francisco, um, we'd be probably having a different conversation about him.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, he's certainly got a lot of arm talent, and he's one of those quarterbacks that when he gets hot and he has time to throw, you know, he's very accurate and he can push the
Hmm.
ball downfield, and he's got really good weapons there, obviously. You know, in Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, Adam Thielen's getting a little old, KJ Osborne. I mean, they are they're a good offense. He's obviously been better at home than on the road. You know, the one thing I'll say is if you look at the 8 quarterbacks that are still left in this playoffs, all of them can run. They're all mobile. Now they're not all Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen or even Daniel Jones who run a ton, but
Hmm.
you know, they can all make plays when they need to with their legs. Brock Purdy included. You know, he had another rushing touchdown last week. He looks pretty good on the move. Um, you know, Kirk Cousins and Tom Brady were the two most immobile quarterbacks in this postseason. I'm putting Skylar Thompson aside because he's a third stringer, and you know, I think he was probably too scared to run. But you know, I do wonder, and I know Matt Stafford and the Rams won a Super Bowl last year, but I do wonder when the next time is that we'll see a truly immobile quarterback win a Super Bowl. You know, the game is changing, and most of the quarterbacks, with the exception of maybe Mac Jones, if you look at the quarterbacks that have come out in the last few years and have been taken in the first round, um, almost all of them, or even in the second round, to maybe be starters, almost all of them can move. And so, I think that's a drawback for a guy like Cousins. Like, he isn't going to make those couple of extra first downs a game that, Prescott's going to make, or Herbert or Burrow, just by, running for a few first downs a game. And that, over the course of a season, that makes a difference in winning games. So, can Kirk win a Super Bowl? If the situation is perfect, I think he can. But can quarterbacks like him win a Super Bowl? Yeah, because many have in the past. But I think there are going to be fewer quarterbacks like that. And I think that more and more teams are, looking for guys who can be more dynamic.
Let me ask you this: Do you think Joe Burrow is a mobile, dynamic quarterback?
I think he's mobile enough. Like, I
Yeah.
think that Burrow can take off. You know, he certainly has run when he's needed to. He's not as athletic as, say a Mahomes or even Herbert. I think Herbert's a pretty good runner.
He
Um,
is.
he's probably more a little bit like Tua. Like, he doesn't look to run, but he can move around and make plays, and he can run for first downs.
Yeah, you can. You can.
Um, let's see, where are we? So we talked about Kirk Cousins. Okay.
So
Are you?
a quarterback who is mobile, Dave, is
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson. We saw Tyler Huntley. I thought he looked pretty good against the Bengals for what that's worth. But when you look at the contract negotiations, how those are going, and Lamar's injury history, should Baltimore consider trading Lamar Jackson?
Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, my quick answer is no, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't think there's anything in Tyler Huntley's performance this year that would lead you to say they should trade Lamar because they have Huntley.
Yeah.
Huntley started, what was it, like 5 games, maybe even, I think it was around 5 games, and they didn't score more than 17 points in any of them, including this playoff game. So it's not like the Ravens have someone else that can give you, even like 60 or 70% of what Lamar can give you. My big question about Lamar this week was, I understand that he was not healthy enough to play, and that's a decision that, he makes and the doctors make. And it sounds like you don't want to put him out there. And you think of the example of RG3, like, you don't want to put him out there if he's going to ruin his career by taking a shot to that knee.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, like, why wasn't he at the game? Why didn't he travel with the team? You would think that with their season on the line, that the starting quarterback should be there on the sideline to help the second string quarterback and the offense however he can, by watching the game and seeing what he's seeing. And, he knows the offense as well as anyone. So I thought that was just kind of strange. This whole situation has been strange. It's just been bizarre. Um, with his contract and things that are being said, and I think it'd be crazy to trade him, and you'd get a lot for him. But my guess is that if they can't get a contract done, that they'll franchise tag him. But no, I would not trade Lamar Jackson. I'll ask you the same question. What would you do if you were Baltimore with Lamar right now?
I mean, I think it's a fun conversation to have. Just because I mean, my fantasy background, I love trades and Lamar. You think about trading Lamar Jackson in fantasy, what you could get. I can only imagine what you could get for him in real life. But like you, no, I mean, Lamar Jackson is a generational talent. You don't trade guys like that. I mean, he's an MVP. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, and he made first team All Pro. I don't see why or how how or why Baltimore could even trade Lamar if they wanted to.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But it's going to be an interesting offseason for them. And It doesn't seem like, and they fired Greg Roman the other day, today.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so
believe that was today.
we'll see if that's something that matters to Lamar. Because that offense, I mean, they really need to get him some playmakers. Uh,
Yes.
Hopefully Rashad Bateman will be back next year and healthy, but they need another receiver at least. So we'll see what happens there. That was crazy though, the way that game, not quite the way it ended, but that fumble six with Huntley, trying from the 2-yard line to stick the football over the goal line, and the fumble just kind of going right into Sam Hubbard's hands, and then Mark Andrews chasing him. Both of those guys must have needed oxygen after that, because those are two
Oh
pretty
my
big guys,
goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
running basically 100 yards. And Andrews got blocked in the back at the end. They didn't call it, which, whatever. I mean, the Bengals probably would have scored anyway. They would have had the ball on the 10-yard line. But that plays a 14-point swing, or at least a potential one. You don't see that all the time. And when you do, it usually breaks the back of the team it happens to. But the Ravens got the ball back again at the end of the game and had a chance to tie it. So that was, I give them credit for hanging in there. I don't give them credit for how they managed the clock at the end of the game. And that's maybe another story for another time. But I just, that was another one it was sort of like watching Miami take delay of game penalties. Like, I don't know what the Ravens were doing on that last drive. They just let the game basically ended with them having 2 timeouts in their pocket, and running out of time and out of downs. But that whole sequence was kind of crazy, but it was sort of nuts the way that game ended. So before we leave the wild card round, Paul, one more question. Was the Cowboys, we talked a decent amount about that Cowboys game, but was their performance the most surprising to you of any team? Just sort of looking at any team and how they performed um, this week. Was that the most surprising one for you?
Yeah, it was because you look at it. I mean, Tom Brady, his experience. I know that the Bucks team we talked about how they just didn't look right all season, but to dominate a Tom Brady led team the way that they did was truly shocking. And then you look at Tom Brady and the Bucks on offense. I mean, him and Mike Evans being so out of sync. I hadn't seen any. I've never seen anything like that, especially again from Tom Brady.
Yeah, they didn't look good. And they had a lot of games like that this year, like I said.
Yeah,
I've never seen so many Brady passes just like, when the camera's on him, which it is, like, they show the quarterback and the ball, you see Brady throw, and you just assume there's going to be a receiver hit perfectly in stride. And a lot of his passes were just like skipping across the grass with no
yeah.
receiver within 5 yards of him. And you're kind of like, whoa, where was he throwing that? And in the offseason, we'll talk about where he might go next year, whether he'll play, and if so, where. But that'll be an interesting topic. I mean, for me, I wasn't that surprised by the Cowboys. I guess a little bit, because that hadn't seen that game from Dak really this whole season. And it was
Right.
just a dominating performance on both sides of the ball. But the Bucks weren't a very good team this year. So for me, I mean, like I said before, I was pretty surprised at how Miami came out and how well they played, or at least how good of a job they did staying in their game with a team that's a lot better than them and a lot healthier than them. But I think the Jaguars, just as a team, playing so poorly for a half or most of a half, and then so well for the rest of the game. And similarly, the Chargers, like, their defense just getting turnover after turnover and then not being able to stop the Jaguars in the second half. I think both of those teams that were just the most surprising to me, that in one football game you could have such a drastic turnaround, even though we've seen that kind of thing. We saw it with the Colts and the Vikings earlier this year, but this was a playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
You don't it's not shocking when it happens to a bad team like the Colts. It was pretty shocking to me that it happened to a team like the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, 31 unanswered points. That's unheard of.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All right, Dave, we're going to move on to the divisional round, and when you look at this round, I mean, it's always the best of the bunch, in my opinion. Is this the best round of the playoffs?
Well, it certainly was last year, and last year's divisional round might have been the best single weekend of NFL playoff games in the history of the league. And I've been watching NFL
Oh,
football for a long time, but
mm-hmm.
you had three games that were decided by a field goal, and that all came right down to it. And those weren't the three best games, because in addition to that, you had that Chiefs Bills overtime game with all those points after the 2-minute warning. Game
Yeah.
that became an instant classic and got them to change the playoff overtime rule, because people were so upset that someone had to lose that game without getting a chance to just answer a score, which is what they
Mm-hmm.
were doing in the final 2 minutes. One thing that I think has made the division round better than it used to be is the elimination of the second team getting a bye, because what used to happen is you'd have the wild card round, and then two teams in each conference would come out of that, and they'd go play two teams that were coming off a bye at home, and they would often get killed. More often than not, the division round had at least one blowout, and sometimes two or three blowouts. But now that there's only one bye in each conference, I think you're more likely to get more competitive games, because you've only got the one team coming off a bye. And this is my favorite weekend of the NFL postseason. Because wild card round, you could have a couple teams in there that really don't necessarily belong in the playoffs and are playing teams that are much better than them. And you get some games that tend to be, or could be, more lopsided. I think in the divisional round, um, you're more likely to get really good games. And I like that it's in 2 days, not three. That was a little much, I think. What about
Mm-hmm.
you? What's your answer to this question?
Yeah, I mean, recency bias, but you look back at the divisional round from last year and how good that was. It's hard to top anything like that. I'll say it's close, but you look at the championship games, and I feel like they're a little bit more exciting because of what's on the line. I mean, the division titles on the line and the chance to go to the Super Bowl. I feel like those usually make for a good game too. And you look at the game last year, how the Bengals came back in the second half to beat the Chiefs on their first trip to the Super Bowl, and I'm not sure how many years, but kind of came down to the last possession there in that game, and then with the Rams and the 49ers, similar thing. It came down to the last possession there, and I mean that was another game, a great game heading to the Super Bowl too. So I think I'll go with the championship round personally.
Yeah, that one's fun too, because it's all in one day. It's kind of like you you uh you get on the couch and you just watch 7 hours of what should be the four best teams in football figuring
Right.
out you get to the Super Bowl without all the spectacle of the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl's fun, but it's like, the halftime show and all the commercials and everyone's having parties, that you feel less like you're watching a football game with a critical eye. So
Very true.
I
Yeah.
like, I
Very
like
true.
all these I like all these earlier rounds better. Um, I know that football's a team game, and we tend to oversimplify and say, well, this quarterback's going against this quarterback, but it's really team against team. But there are some very intriguing matchups featuring the quarterbacks this week, which, thinking just about the quarterbacks and, kind of, quarterback gets the ball, his team, and then the other quarterback gets the ball when his team gets the ball. What are you most looking forward to seeing? Which game are you most looking forward to from that perspective, from watching the quarterbacks go at it?
Yeah, this was a difficult question, Dave, because I look at Mahomes versus Lawrence, and that's going to be a really good matchup. And a matchup I think we're going to see more of in the future. But I think Burrow versus Allen is the one I'm most intrigued by, because I feel like if Burrow wins, he would move ahead of Allen in quarterback rankings, for me personally. And I think he would take sole possession of second best quarterback in the NFL.
Interesting. That's the one for me also, maybe for slightly different reasons. I think that, well, first of all, they've never faced their teams have never faced each other while they're the starting quarterbacks. They tried to 3 weeks ago, and that
Yeah.
was, of course, the canceled game. So, there was a shot that they showed on TV. I mean, obviously, all the players were very impacted by what happened with Damar Hamlin, and there was a shot of like Burrow and Allen kind of hugging each other, and Allen, you could see Allen had just been crying, and a pretty emotional scene. So I think these guys like maybe have a tiny bit of a bond from
Mm-hmm.
both being a part of that game. They're obviously two of the biggest young stars at quarterback, and we talked about this either last week or the week before about how well the AFC is set up with all these amazing young quarterbacks in the conference, and these are two of them. And we talked about the sort of Brady and Manning for all those years. Well, we've got Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Lawrence, perhaps. And we don't kind of know yet how it's all going to play out and which ones are going to win the most Super Bowls or get to the most Super Bowls. But this is where it
Mm-hmm.
starts, and so a game like this, and again, the Bills could lose and Josh Allen might not be the reason they lose. The Bengals could lose and Joe Burrow might not be the reason they lose. But as sports fans, certainly that's kind of how we measure it and kind of how we look at it, right or wrong. And so, like you said, it's kind of as you think of the pecking order, and Joe Burrow's already been to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen has not. He wants to get to one, and he's been
Mm-hmm.
in the league a couple years longer than Burrow. So I think a lot's on the line. And then, let's say the Chiefs win, then the winner gets Mahomes. It's like this is how it's going to be in the AFC, and it's great because we're going to see this, barring injury, for the next 5 to 8 years with these 4 or 5 guys. Just like it's like back when the heavyweight division in boxing mattered, and you had to beat the best to be the best. And again, it's not all about the quarterbacks. You know, I'll put Dan Marino up there with anyone who's ever thrown a football. He may not have been as clutch as some of them, but he never won a Super Bowl. And I know
Yeah.
that aided him and it eats at Dolphin fans. So this kind of stuff does matter. And it matters for legacy and it matters for the players. And so I'm also just very interested to watch that one and how it plays out.
Can I ask you where do you have Joe Burrow and Josh Allen ranked? Obviously it's Mahomes number one, but where are those guys ranked for you?
It's hard because we think of fantasy football like clouds all this, right? Because
Oh
from a
yeah.
fantasy perspective, I would still have Allen in front of him just because he runs so much. Um, Burrow's been to a Super Bowl and he's, been really good in the playoffs, and he's been better as a fourth quarter quarterback than Josh Allen so far. Allen's been in the league a little more. Like Burrow came in as the number one pick and kind of the golden boy. Um, had a worse first season, but he was on a worse team. I don't know. Ask me after they play on Sunday because I have them pretty close. I mean, I'd probably put Allen a little ahead of him because
Yeah.
he's been in the league a little longer and has been in the play. His team has won their division more years in a row. All that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
they're close, I think, and they both have a lot
Absolutely.
to prove.
I touched on this matchup a little bit, talking about Mahomes and Lawrence, but you look at Jacksonville versus Kansas City. Do you think Jacksonville stands a chance?
Stand a chance. Any of these teams can beat. What's left. The teams that are left in the playoffs, I think anything is possible.
Right.
Having said that, I think this is the game of the four where an upset is the least likely. And if you look at history, there are some reasons for that. First of all, the Chiefs have been to the last four AFC championship games, and in order to do that, you have to win your divisional round game, right? So they've won 4 straight divisional round games.
Hmm.
Um, they're really tough at home. I think they only lost 1 home game this year. Um, they're coming off a bye, and these are numbers that are not good for Jacksonville. Andy Reid in his career as a head coach, including playoffs, is 28-5 coming off the bye. Patrick Mahomes in his career as a player is 9-1 coming off a bye. Like, they've had 2 weeks to prepare, to rest, to get healthy, to work on, whatever they needed to work on. I think they're probably glad they're not seeing the Chargers again, because that team has given them fits the last couple years. All their games are close. The Chiefs, were not particularly good against the spread this year. They played a lot more close games than you'd think for like a team that's the number 1 ranked offense and like I think the 11th ranked defense and led the NFL in scoring. Um, I think the Chiefs will win. I think they're, I wrote this in my column this week. They're kind of like a cat that plays with its catches a mouse and
Hmm.
plays with it for a little while before
Yeah.
it kills it. I think the Jaguars will stick around. I think it'll be a game that's competitive most of the way, but I think, Chiefs by a touchdown for me, and I'll be very, very surprised if Jacksonville can get this upset. Now, one interesting aspect to this game is it's the coaching matchup is like, the student against the teacher. Reed and Pedersen go back 28 years. Andy Reid was one of the offensive assistant coaches on Mike Holmgren's staff in Green Bay in the mid 90s, and Pedersen was a quarterback there. He was behind Brett Favre. Um, they got to know each other. Then later, Pedersen was on Reid's staff in Philly. Then he was his offensive coordinator in Kansas City. These guys are good friends. Pedersen will constantly say that Reid is his mentor and that he owes him a lot. So that'll be an interesting aspect to this game. Can the student beat the teacher?
Right.
But I don't think he will. But what do you think? Do you think Jacksonville has a shot in this one?
I mean, with a coach like Doug Peterson, the team always has a chance, Dave. But this isn't Andy Reid's first rodeo. As successful as Reid is as a coach, I was surprised to see his playoff record is 17-15. With 2 losses coming in the Super Bowl, of course. That being said, with as inexperienced as Jacksonville is, I think the Chiefs win this game pretty easily.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Let's move to the I-95 game up here in the Northeast. So, the Giants and Eagles, it's a long history. And I wrote about this in my column this week. There have been some very memorable moments in this rivalry, which goes back to 1933.
Oh
Um,
wow!
the Giants played last week and Philly didn't. And we've seen a couple times in history, and the 49ers did it last year, although they didn't get to the Super Bowl. They came very close. Where one of these wild card teams wins on the road and just kind of gets on a roll. You think the Giants have any kind of advantage because they played last week while Philly didn't? Normally, you would say the opposite, that the team with the bye has an advantage, but the Giants are like playing with house money, right? No one expected them to be here. The Eagles are the 1 seed. All the pressure is on them. So
Right.
what do you think about this game?
Dave, rust is a real thing, and so is momentum. We know Giants have all the momentum right now. You look at Jalen Hurts; he's not 100%, but of course, a lot of players playing right now aren't at this point. But you look at Daboll's experience in big games during his time in Buffalo and New England, and his 1 year at Alabama. I do think that the Giants have a slight advantage in this game. What about you?
They played twice this year, and the second game you can kind of throw out because the Giants didn't play most of their key starters. Interestingly, that game was kind of competitive.
Yeah.
It was Hurts's first game back. The first game they played really was a rout. The Eagles scored touchdowns on their first 3 possessions. They ran for 253 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. The Giants had no answer for them. I think I think as much as the Giants have momentum and kind of feel like they can beat anyone right now, and they're, everyone's pulling for them, and they're playing with house money and all the other cliches you can throw out there. I think this is a bad matchup for them defensively, because where the Giants are weakest is their linebacking core. They really don't have like athletic linebackers who can cover, who can, run and tackle in the open field, who can spy a mobile quarterback. And, you need that against Philadelphia. So,
Hmm.
look, it's a division game, third time they're playing. We saw last week with division games that, even Seattle hanging for a half, and what Miami and Baltimore shorthanded without their starting quarterbacks were able to do against teams they know very well. Um, you never know in a division game. And like I said, the pressure's on the Eagles, not on the Giants. Um, so this will be an interesting game to watch, but I just think I think it was probably good for Philly to have a week of rest. And like I said earlier in the show, going from playing one of the worst defenses in the NFL um, indoors, on a fast track, um, to playing outside at Philadelphia with a hostile crowd that really doesn't like you. Um, I think it's going to be a tall order for the Giants, but stranger things have happened, so we'll see. And certainly, everyone in my house is pulling for the Giants, so hoping we have something to cheer about.
Yes, sir. Dave, we talked about the quarterback battle between Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, but when you look at the other pieces of that team, are the Bengals the better team?
It's a good question. I think at the start of the season, I would have said no. I think the addition of Von Miller was really a huge one for the Bills. And then, of course, he was lost for the season. I mean, interestingly, neither one of these teams has lost in like 2 months. The Bills have won 8 in a row. The Bengals have won 9 in a row. And of course, one of them would have a loss because they were supposed to play each other 3 weeks ago. Um, talent wise, you could go position by position. I think the Bills have more talent on defense, and the Bills also, their defense gets better as the game goes on, typically. Um, they're stingier as they go, but the Bengals offense sometimes gets better as the game goes on. Um, I think these teams are very even. Uh they're the 2 and the 3 seed. They only lost 7 games between them this season. They both have great quarterbacks. The Bengals have better depth at receiver, but they both have like some elite weapons. Um, so I think they're really close, and you'd be splitting hairs saying one team is better than the other. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you touched on it perfectly. I look when I look at these teams side by side, I would agree that the Bengals have the better defense. Although not excuse me, the Bills have the better defense. Well, but the Bengals have a pretty solid defense as well. I would give the edge to on offense to the Bengals. When you look at that receiving core, but man, overall, it probably still is the Bills by a very very small margin.
Yeah, I mean, for this week, the one thing I'm concerned about with the Bengals is that they could be down 3 starting offensive linemen. And in the past, the main issue Joe Burrow has had in his career when he's had issues is a lack of protection. You
Hmm.
saw it in that Tennessee game last year in the playoffs in this round, which they somehow won, even with Burrow getting sacked like a record number of times in a playoff game.
Hmm.
Um, and even without Von Miller, the Bills do have pass rushers. Greg Rousseau can get to the quarterback. They sometimes blitz Matt Milano. They have other guys. And if the Bengals are in fact down even 2 of their starting offensive linemen, that to me that I really wanted. Well, we'll get to our predictions and picks in a little bit, but I think that may be when teams are this close, something small like that that isn't that small. Like it's kind of a major thing. Just could be the difference, and could be enough to swing whatever small advantage there is one team's way. And I am worried about that this week for the Bengals.
Yes, sir. Yeah, another matchup that's interesting is the 49ers and the Cowboys, Dave. But is the Dallas defense the best defense Brock Purdy will have faced?
Yeah, I mean, without question, it's the best defense he'll have faced. And if you look at the defenses he has faced, there have been a couple okay ones. The Commanders statistically were a pretty good defense this year. The Dolphins defense kept getting better as the season went on. And that was the first game, when Garoppolo got hurt and he came in. But he's faced the Seahawks twice, the Cardinals, the Raiders, nothing that strong.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, you know, they can get after the quarterback. They cover well. This is without question the best defense he's faced. And I think one of the most interesting things that I will be watching this weekend is how Purdy handles that. He's done amazing things. Like he's done a whole bunch of things this year that no rookie quarterback has ever done, including last week when he accounted for 4 touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 throwing. No rookie had ever done that in a playoff game. And I think since he became the starter, his touchdown to interception ratio is 14-2. And plus he's run a couple in. Or maybe it's 12-2. Whatever it is, it's really impressive. So I'm going to be watching very closely to see what it's like when he faces a real kind of big boy defense, assuming Dallas's defense shows up and plays well.
Right.
So I think the answer to that is yes. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, you hit the nail on the head, Dave. You talked about those defense, the ones that he has faced. I was looking at the defenses he had faced, and I saw the Commanders in there, and I was like, oh, that was probably a tough matchup. But it really didn't seem like until just that last week of the season, Commanders versus Dallas, where we even saw that defensive line at full strength, and they were still missing a key piece. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. I think Dallas, again, depending on which defense shows up, will be the best defense that he has faced.
Yeah, I agree. And that game, it's kind of fitting that that's the last game of the weekend. If you look at the history, those are the 2 teams in the NFC that have been to the most Super Bowls. It's probably a little before your time, but in the 90s, they once faced each other 3 straight years in the conference championship game. Like, this is a good, for a non-division rivalry. These are like the 2 of the perennial, powers in the NFC. I know Dallas, hasn't been to a title game in an NFC championship game in a long time. But they're certainly good now. And, these are two of the most popular franchises, teams anyway. Their followings, both have national followings. It's kind of in that last Sunday night slot. So I think this is kind of the game of the week, probably. I mean,
Oh
Bengals
yeah,
Bills is a great game. And Giants Eagles is a great rivalry game, but I think this is probably the marquee matchup. And it's also the tightest betting line of the week. So, as the 49ers have won 11 in a row, but Dallas, was kind of that team that came out of the wild card round, maybe looking the best, I'm always leery of the team that looks a little better than they are. But Dallas has been a good team all year, so I don't really feel like they're that team this year. So that's going to be a really fun game to watch. So we're kind of getting to the end here, Paul. Let's now we've talked about all the games. So let's give our predictions, and I'll ask you, and then I'll give mine.
yes, sir.
Why don't we alternate? So for Jacksonville and Kansas City, I am taking the Chiefs for all the reasons I gave. I don't think they'll cover. I think they'll win by about a touchdown. I think the line in this game is 8.5. But
Oh wow.
I think the Chiefs take care of businesses at home. Who are you taking in that game?
Dave, since 2013, Andy Reid is 4-2 in the divisional round with one of those losses coming off a bye. Still, the experience of the Chiefs players gives them the edge. I'm going with the Chiefs.
Okay, so we agree on that one. Last week we didn't have a disagreement, so it'd be interesting to see if we have one this week.
Yeah, we'll see.
Giants and Eagles is the second game, and I'm doing the games in the order they're being played. So that Jacksonville Kansas City game is the afternoon game on Saturday. The night game is the Giants going down the New Jersey Turnpike, couple about 2 hours drive down to Philadelphia to face their arch rivals, the Eagles. Who do you have in this one?
Dave, I don't know why, but my gut says New York. Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. I like hearing it. I think Philly is just a tough matchup for the Giants.
Yeah.
They come out and play their game. I just don't think the Giants are going to be able to get enough stops on defense. So I'm going to take the Eagles. So we have our first split of the postseason. Game number 3. This is the day game, or the first of the games on Sunday. Cincinnati at Buffalo. Buffalo's favored by 5, which I think is a little too high. I'm going to take the Bills here, and I'm very tempted to take the Bengals for all the reasons that we talked about, and I think I trust Burrow a little more right now. Josh Allen leads the NFL in turnovers in total when you count the 3 from this past week.
Oh,
He can't
wow.
afford to be sloppy in this game. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of fumbles. I think it's
Yeah.
16 interceptions and 6 fumbles.
My
And look, if
goodness.
you run as much as he does, you're gonna have some fumbles. But in any case, I think this is going to be a close game. I think those offensive line injuries for the Bengals are going to be there. I think they're going to matter in this game, and Buffalo's at home. There's going to be a lot of emotion. Both of these teams were on the field for that Damar Hamlin near tragedy that happened a few weeks ago. I think that's a big storyline for this game, but I'm going to take the Bills in a very close one. Who do you like in this one?
Again, going with the gut, but Joe Cool and the Bengals won a big game on the road, Dave.
All right. All right. Well, they certainly did that a couple times last year. So
Yeah.
I hear you there. Last game, your Cowboys going into San Francisco. It's the 5 seed against the 2 seed. It's a tight line. San Francisco's favored by 3.5. Who do you like in this game, Paul?
Dave, Dak and the Dallas defense give the 49ers and Brock Purdy everything they have, and it works. Dallas with a close win.
All right, so we have 3 different ones because I'm going to take the 49ers.
Oh,
I'm tempted to take the Cowboys, but
yeah.
I think the 49ers are the most complete team in the NFL, and I think as long as their
They're,
quarterback doesn't implode,
mm-hmm.
and I realize I took all 4 favorites. I took all 4 home teams. I looked hard and I won't be surprised if there's an upset or 2 this week, but I will also not be surprised if all 4 home teams win, and I'm picking that to happen. I think next week, looking at how this is going to shape out, I'm guessing I will take at least one upset. But for this week, I just don't see it in any of these games. And as well as Dallas played last week, Dak threw a pick in each of the 7 games before that one, and the 49ers there's something like plus 11 in turnovers over the last 6 games, and those 2 trends intersecting is something I'm a little worried about for the Cowboys, and I don't know if they have another perfect game in them like they threw last week, but we will see. That's why they play the game. So
Exactly.
you want to do the bold calls?
Yeah, Dave. We're gonna do what we always do every week. Our bold calls for this is going to be the divisional round edition. What's your bold call this week?
My bold call of this week is that a player that kind of hasn't been filling up the stat sheet the last 6 weeks. Travis Kelce has not scored a touchdown in 6 weeks. Going up against the Jaguars defense that allowed the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends this year, gave up over 100 yards and a touchdown to Gerald Everett last week. A big game is coming for Travis Kelce. Over 100 yards, at least 2 touchdowns. That's my bold call of the week. So if you're in any kind of like daily fantasy kind of thing, I know Kelce costs a lot, or in any kind of playoff contest. I think he's in for a monster game. That's my bold call. What is yours?
For me, Dave, I think you're going to like this one. I think Daniel Jones will have more rushing yards than Jalen Hurts.
That is bold. And well, he had 70 last week, so I guess it could happen. But that's a tall order. I know in the first game they played, Hurts had close to 80 rushing yards. In the second one, I don't think he ran as much. He was probably trying to protect his shoulder a little bit and not take too many hits. But we'll see. I'm interested to see if Hurts truly is 100% at this point, and I'm sure the week off helped him.
Yeah, I bet it did. All right, Dave, we're wrapping things up here, but like we always do at the end of the episode, remind the people where they can find you on Twitter and where they can find your content.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And this has been a lot of fun breaking down
Always.
the divisional round games. I'm really looking forward to the football this week. My Twitter feed is at Pigskin Papers, capital P, capital P. And my website is thepigskinpapers.com. And again, I've got a column up right now that's a divisional round preview. If you read the column after you listen to this show, you're going to hear a lot of repetition because I covered some of what's in the column on the show, but I hope you'll all check it out. And for you, Paul, where can everyone find you?
Guys, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Ryan15. Again, I touched on earlier. I should have my Trust or Bust divisional round article dropping this week. My guy CD Piglet and I will be recording a live stream tomorrow for the Cowboys 49ers preview game, and you can find us every Monday on Twitter recording across the Cowboys as well. I want to say thank you guys for joining us, and Dave, as always, man, it's fun, man, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely, Paul, and good luck to your Cowboys this week. I hope you're wearing a hat and having a big smile when we next see each other in a week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.